Let's get right into it because we need to talk about how the narrative structure of this third season completely and utterly falls apart. As a massive lover of cinematic storytelling, I honestly find it tragic to watch what was once a tightly written, highly successful show just entirely abandon its cohesive narrative engine. Instead of a driving, purposeful plot, what we get is a season that relies incredibly heavily on these bland, task-oriented side quests. Think about it. When you strip away the spectacular, big-budget visuals, what you're actually left with is a structural illusion. I'm going to break down exactly how this season devolved into a string of video game fetch quests rather than delivering a structured, emotional cinematic journey. The problems start immediately. The very opening scene sets a bizarre precedent for the entire season. We start with this massive, dinosaur-like creature attacking a covert base. Now ask yourself, why in the world wouldn't an elite, hyper-vigilant warrior race utilize even the most basic early warning systems or perimeter scouts? I mean, it makes absolutely zero sense. It's pure visual spectacle that sacrifices internal logic right out of the gate. The script is just manufacturing a flashy action set piece while completely disregarding the established tactical competence of these characters. We're expected to just turn our brains off and watch the explosions. And this illogical opening kicks off a staggering, bloated, multi-planet side quest. Let me map this out for you, because the chronological flow is just absurd. We bounce from fighting pirates on Navarro, to embarking on a highly specific fetch quest for an IG-11 memory chip, to taking a weird detour to Bo-Katan's castle where our hero is rejected, to flying all the way to Tatooine just to buy an entirely different droid. Let that sink in for a second. This entire convoluted goose chase spanning multiple episodes exists solely so our main character can eventually go take a bath in the mines of Mandalore. That is not plot progression, that is padding. So he goes through all of this, and when he finally reaches these long sought-after mines, the payoff is terribly underwhelming. He's almost instantly trapped by this random cyborg creature. From a purely screenwriting perspective, I look at this as a massive, unforced error. After spending multiple episodes building up this destination, the protagonist is immediately stripped of his agency. He is literally sidelined in his own story, which inevitably kicks off yet another tedious, entirely avoidable rescue mission. This trap forces a logistically absurd rescue loop that completely kills the pacing. Let's trace the steps here. Our hero is trapped, so he sends his small, barely communicative companion alone to the surface. The companion then flies a spaceship to a completely different planet, manages to recruit Bo-Katan, and then they fly all the way back down into the exact same mines. It's a completely transparent, agonizingly slow maneuver by the writers. They needed to manufacture a scenario to shift the power dynamic and let Bo-Katan swoop in and wield the Darksaber, but the mechanics of getting there are just exhausting to watch. And the lack of attention to detail during this rescue is just glaring. The hero slips and nearly drowns in the living waters. Now this would be fine, except the show literally established earlier in this exact episode that his helmet seals perfectly underwater. Bending your own freshly established lore just to force a second rescue sequence is a prime example of a script fighting its own organic flow. The writers had a specific outcome mandated, and they didn't care if they had to contradict themselves to get there. Right after this, we hit what is arguably the most jarring pacing shift of the entire season. 35. That's how many minutes are dedicated to a completely disjointed subplot on Coruscant. Right when the main storyline should be accelerating after the massive, supposedly life-changing events on Mandalore, the brakes are slammed. Hard. We are suddenly dropped into a drastically different show, tonally and visually, focused entirely on minor secondary characters. For over half an hour, I sat there watching incredibly slow-paced scenes of characters eating space biscuits and walking down endless, gray bureaucratic corridors. It's pure filler. And the worst part? It culminates in an entirely predictable double-cross. The big revelation that it's a trap carries absolutely zero emotional weight because the setup was so painfully mundane. It acts as this massive, bloated detour that honestly disrespects our investment in the core plot of the season. So finally, we return to the main plot, and you'd naturally hope things tighten up. They don't. During a beach training sequence, this supposedly elite warrior faction fails, yet again, to set up basic lookouts, and a child is kidnapped by a giant space pterodactyl. I mean, come on, it's a literal copy-paste of the alligator attack from episode 1, relying on the exact same contrivance. A random monster attacks an unprepared camp twice in one season, signals a severe lack of creative problem-solving in the writer's room. And the plot contrivances just stack up immediately after the attack. The Mandalorians give chase, flying after the beast, but their jetpacks conveniently run out of fuel right in the middle of the pursuit. This is a classic textbook hallmark of weak writing, introducing a sudden, highly convenient mechanical failure simply to halt the action and force the characters into yet another convoluted, drawn-out tracking mission. It feels incredibly forced. What follows is quite possibly the slowest rescue mission ever committed to film. They track the beast on foot, fly all the way back to base to assemble a larger hunting party, fly all the way back to the lair, and then, wait for it, they stop for a campfire dinner. A child is actively sitting in a monster's nest, potentially being eaten, and this highly trained rescue party stops to eat and get a good night's sleep. It is baffling. It completely shatters any sense of narrative urgency or tension. Next up, the narrative takes yet another strange, disjointed detour with a random pirate attack on Navarro. To justify an extended battle sequence here, the script introduces this incredibly forced slapstick humor. We literally get pirates taking over a local school just so they can sit at children's desks and have a drink. It creates massive tonal dissonance. I find it impossible to take the threats in this cinematic universe seriously when the villains are treated like an afternoon punchline in a kids' show. As if the pacing wasn't erratic enough at this point, we then hit the infamous detour to Plaisir 15. This is a utopian planet reliant on repurposed battle droids. Now keep in mind, we are in the back half of the season right now. This is a crucial time when the narrative absolutely should be accelerating toward its climax. Instead, everything halts completely for a standalone, totally episodic murder mystery that has absolutely no bearing on the overarching stakes of the show. And the actual execution of this murder mystery is baffling. Our seasoned, hardened warriors track down the malfunctioning droids by discovering nanobots hidden in their quote-unquote droid juice. I have to be honest, with a massive production budget and a rich cinematic universe to play in, reducing the narrative complexity to "we found nanobots in the droid juice" isn't just lazy, it feels like an insult to the intelligence of a viewer who is expecting layered, meaningful storytelling. It's the logic of a Saturday morning cartoon. Now let's talk about the handling of lore and consequence, because this one really hurts. For multiple seasons, we were explicitly told the Darksaber must be won in combat for the wielder to be legitimate. That was the rule. Yet the writers transfer this highly coveted, culturally massive artifact to Bo-Katan based on a vague technicality from several episodes prior. When carefully established rules are bent this easily just to move the plot forward, the stakes evaporate entirely. We are left with a massive character moment that feels completely unearned and dramatically hollow. Heading into the penultimate episode, the script finally attempts to introduce some overarching stakes by showing us the Shadow Council. They sit around dropping ominous buzzwords like Project Necromancer, heavily foreshadowing a massive cloning project. And while it's definitely nice to finally see some connective tissue, it's a heavy-handed exposition dump. It's shoved into the final hours simply because the previous episodes wasted so much valuable runtime on pointless side quests. But any tension built by this council meeting is instantly deflated by a gag. Grogu is given a mechanized IG-12 suit. This turns what should be a critical, serious structural moment, the uniting of the warrior tribes, into a cheap comedy routine where he just repeatedly hits yes and no buttons. You simply cannot effectively build a dark, brooding atmosphere of impending war while simultaneously asking your audience to laugh at a toddler driving a mech suit. The tone is completely all over the place. And notice how the director deliberately pads the runtime as we approach the big finale. Before the characters even reach the underground forge, we have to endure agonizingly slow ship descents, unedited, real-time walks off cargo ramps, and long, silent staring contests between different factions. This isn't cinematic tension, this is dragging your feet. The pacing grinds to an absolute halt exactly when the narrative should be propelling us forward at breakneck speed. When the ambush finally happens, Moff Gideon captures our protagonist. But look at Gideon's new suit. It is a visually confused mashup of pre-existing iconic villains. It's a little bit of Vader, a dash of Boba Fett, a bit of the Dark Troopers. Instead of giving him a unique, terrifying identity that stands on its own, it's just a nostalgic blender. It completely distracts from the actual threat he poses because you're too busy picking out the visual references to older, better movies. And the handling of Gideon's grand cloning project is genuinely shocking. The big, season-long reveal is that he created Force-sensitive duplicates of himself. Sounds like a massive, terrifying hurdle for our heroes to overcome, right? Wrong! Every single clone is instantly destroyed in their vats with the push of a single button before they even wake up or do a single thing. It offers zero dramatic payoff for literally years of mystery box setups. The entire sequence of events in the finale is somehow incredibly rushed and completely bloated at the exact same time. On one hand, we speedrun through major events. Reinforcements arrive instantly, the protagonist escapes effortlessly, the clones are destroyed without a fight, and the legendary Darksaber is unceremoniously crushed in a few seconds. Yet simultaneously, a falling capital ship in the background seemingly takes 30 minutes to finally crash into the base. It's structurally messy, prioritizing chaotic visual spectacle over earned rhythmic pacing. Even the dialogue during this final confrontation completely abandons any sense of cinematic subtext. Instead of sharp, character-driven exchanges, the script relies heavily on cliché, eye-rolling catchphrases like "Mandalorians are stronger together." The script literally just spells out the central theme in bold letters. It acts as if we, the audience, can't possibly grasp the concept of unity without it being explicitly shouted at us during a laser fight.
But the most frustrating part? I cannot overstate how anticlimactic the final emotional resolution of the season is. The profound, beautifully complex father-son bond that was carefully built over 3 seasons is finalized with a single, incredibly casual line of dialogue. "I'll adopt him." That's it. No ceremony, no deep resonance, just a quick bureaucratic exchange with an official that feels entirely unearned and incredibly flat. It finalizes an adoption without any of the dramatic weight or emotion this relationship truly deserved.
Looking back at the structure of this entire season, the truth is undeniable. What we are left with is not a cohesive cinematic story. It is a disjointed, soulless collection of task-oriented video game cutscenes masquerading as a plot. We get a quest, we fight a monster, we get a lore drop, and we move on. There is absolutely no central, unifying narrative engine driving real, meaningful internal or external character growth.
As I wrap up this structural autopsy, I have a serious question for you to ponder. If an entire season of a flagship franchise show can be built purely on episodic diversions, fetch quests, and cheap nostalgia without a central narrative engine, are we watching the end of proper screenwriting? Have we finally crossed the line where deep cinematic storytelling is being entirely replaced by endless algorithm-friendly content? I really want you to think about how we consume narratives today and what we are willing to accept.